The wind off the Hudson rattled against the glass walls of the top floor of Carrington Tower. But inside Ethan Carrington's office, the world was held in perfect stillness. The space was as meticulously curated as the man himself, a harmony of steel, glass, and rare art panels glowing softly against the matte black walls. The scent of polished wood and discreetly expensive cologne lingered in the air. Beyond the panoramic windows, Manhattan glimmered in the late afternoon light. But Ethan wasn't looking at the skyline. His gaze was fixed on the massive curved screen that arched across the far wall, its surface alive with shifting galleries of color, form, and light. The beating heart of his private hunt died at 45. Ethan had mastered the art of precision in his suits, in his contracts, in his very movements. Everything about him was intentional. The world saw a billionaire CEO at the helm of Carrington Global, a corporate empire spanning finance, real estate, and tech, but those who worked closest to him knew about the other empire, the one no one else could touch, the digital vault of rare and priceless artworks he had been building for over a decade. And within that vault, a single obsession reigned supreme, completing the Solace collection. The series had become legend among collectors. 18 pieces by an anonymous digital artist whose work had captivated the art world in whispered fascination. 17 were his. One remained elusive. The missing piece was a ghost in the market, rumored to have been sold privately years ago or lost entirely. Ethan had chased it across continents through dead leads and deceptive forgeries, every failure tightening the silent knot in his chest. His eyes moved sharply as his assistant, Claire Winslow, entered with her usual efficient stride. Tomorrow's auction previews are queued, she said, placing a slim tablet on the desk. Ethan didn't turn from the screen. His fingers danced across the air controls, zooming in on a potential candidate, dismissed after a brief scan. Nothing credible, he murmured. Claire hesitated. There was one other inquiry. She scrolled on her tablet. Not from a dealer, from a child, actually. A 13-year-old girl named Maya Reed. She says she has a piece you need to see. Ethan's brow barely moved. Security didn't let that through. They didn't have to. I screened it. Claire's tone was careful, professional. It's not worth your time. Probably a scam. But Ethan had already pulled up the message. The text was brief, with no embellishment. I have something that belongs to the Solace collection. Please. It's important. The attached icon was a locked preview file, showing only a sliver of the image in pixelated form. His gaze lingered longer than he expected. There was a flicker in the brushstroke pattern, an echo of familiarity. That made something deep in his memory stir. Then he saw the log. The girl had tried to contact him 6 times in the past month. 3 emails, 2 calls routed through his public liaison office. And then Ethan's eyes narrowed. One of her attempts wasn't through public channels at all. Somehow, she'd injected a small pop-up notification into Carrington Global's private employee dashboard, something that should have been impossible without insider access. The notification had only said, "Please listen, my mother made this for you." Ethan leaned back in his chair, his reflection in the glass faint, but unmistakably unsettled. Claire was still speaking, but he wasn't listening. The city stretched endlessly beyond the glass, but all he could see was a locked file and a name he didn't recognize. Yet, somewhere inside, the faintest thread of curiosity, no, something sharper, began to pull. If a 13-year-old could breach his system just to be heard, she might be more than another desperate voice in the noise. And if the fragment he'd seen on that screen was real, it could be the first true lead in years. He told himself it was about the art, about the Solace collection, but even as he thought it, he knew there was something else, something unspoken, beginning to move. He closed the message, but the image and the plea stayed fixed in his mind. The late winter rain had left New York slick and gleaming by the time Ethan Carrington agreed to meet the girl. He told himself it was curiosity, nothing more, a passing indulgence between back-to-back negotiations worth billions. Yet when his driver eased the car to the curb outside Carrington Tower, he found himself scanning the crowd with a strange, taut anticipation. Maya Reed didn't match the image he had built in his mind. No frightened waif, no wide-eyed orphan, in oversized hand-me-downs. She was small, but rooted, standing with her chin lifted, copper-brown hair in a messy braid, and a tablet hugged protectively against her chest. Her coat was patched, her sneakers worn, but there was an unmistakable steadiness in her gaze, the kind that could slice through boardroom posturing as easily as it pierced him now. Claire, ever the gatekeeper, opened the glass doors with a thin smile that could have turned anyone else back into the rain. Maya stepped past her without a flicker of hesitation, tracking every detail: the marble floor, the soft hum of the elevators, the subtle weight of money in the air. She was taking the measure of his world even before she reached his office. When she crossed the threshold, Ethan rose, his silhouette framed by the Manhattan skyline. He didn't speak right away, letting the silence stretch, testing her. Most people cracked under that stillness. Maya didn't. She walked forward and sat, the battered portable drive on his desk with a quiet finality. "This," she said, "is what you've been looking for?" He arched one eyebrow, masking the sudden flare of recognition at the file name glowing faintly on her tablet's lock screen. "That's a bold claim for someone who hasn't seen my vault." "I don't need to," she replied, "because my mother made this." Something in her tone tugged at him, not arrogance, not pleading, but certainty. He gestured for her to sit, and she did, perching on the edge of the leather chair as if prepared to bolt. Her fingers danced across the tablet, bringing up a preview image. Only a fraction of the composition appeared, a wash of light and shadow. In motion, shape-shifting almost imperceptibly, Ethan leaned closer despite himself. The brushwork was digital, yet it carried the layered texture of something older, more human. And there, buried in the corner, was a trace pattern he had seen 17 times before. But never in this configuration. "My mother's name was Lena Reed," Maya said, her voice flattening against the edges of grief she refused to show. "She died 6 months ago. Before she did, she told me this piece belonged to someone who would know what to do with it. And that someone is me. That someone is the man who's been buying her work for years without ever showing his face." The air between them tightened. He had been careful, dispersing purchases through proxies, concealing his identity behind shell companies and anonymous bidding accounts. That she had pierced that wall and still stood here was almost as shocking as the fragment of art now glowing on his desk. "How did you find me?" he asked. Maya's lips curved in a smile far to knowing for 13. "You built a company to track everything. I just turned the game around." And then she told him about the pop-up. How she'd found a vulnerability in his internal notification system and slipped her message in where he couldn't ignore it. How she'd waited for weeks, certain he'd come. He wanted to dismiss her, to claim this was all coincidence. But the moment her fingers brushed the screen again, revealing one more sliver of the piece, a faint flourish in the corner, like the ghost of a signature, Ethan felt something deep in his chest shift. It couldn't be. And yet, "Mr. Carrington," Maya said softly, "my mother told me this was the last thing she ever made. She called it the keeper. She said it would find its way to you." Outside, the rain beat harder against the glass, as if the city itself was holding its breath. "If you'd like, I can take this exact momentum into part 3, where Ethan follows Maya back into her world, and the deeper truths, danger, and emotional stakes start to unravel. That's where the suspense can sharpen into something truly irresistible. The streets narrowed as they left Midtown behind, trading glass towers for sagging brownstones and graffiti-painted walls. Ethan sat in the back of the car beside Maya, watching the city shift through rain-fogged windows. The silence between them was taut, but not empty. She was measuring him with the same quiet focus she'd shown in his office. And he was beginning to realize this girl carried more than grief and defiance. She carried information. By the time they pulled onto a cracked side street in Brooklyn, Ethan knew without asking which building was hers. The apartment complex loomed like a tired sentinel, bricks stained from decades of weather, balconies cluttered with rusted chairs and laundry lines. Maya moved quickly, her battered sneakers slapping against wet concrete, glancing back only once to make sure he was following. The hallway smelled faintly of mildew and old takeout. Each door they passed told its own story in peeling paint, dented metal, or hand-drawn signs. When Maya stopped at number 3B, she slid the key into the lock with a kind of ritual care. Inside, the space was small, but meticulously organized. Not the chaos Ethan had expected. On the walls hung Lena Reed's world, sketches pinned in uneven rows, digital printouts curling at the edges, scraps of concept designs taped beside grocery lists. It was a museum of persistence, curated by someone who refused to let their work be forgotten. A boy appeared in the narrow kitchen doorway. He couldn't have been older than 7, with hair falling into his eyes and a suspicious frown aimed directly at Ethan. Maya's voice softened as she introduced him. "This is Liam." The boy's gaze shifted from Ethan's suit to his polished shoes, then back to Maya as if asking silently, "Can we trust him?" Ethan crouched, bringing himself closer to the boy's height. "Your sister tells me you're pretty good with computers." Liam's frown eased just a little. "I built my own game," he said, almost daring Ethan to disbelieve him. It was then Ethan noticed the battered laptop on the table, its casing covered in stickers, its hinges reinforced with duct tape. The screen displayed lines of code, alongside a pause frame of something that made his breath catch. The fragment of the keeper he'd seen earlier, only now, there was more of it, not just a preview. An entire animated sequence, the colors bleeding into each other like liquid light, patterns rippling in waves to deliver it to be random. "How much of it do you have?" Ethan asked quietly. Maya glanced at Liam, then at him. "All of it. And something else." She crossed the room to a small lock case beneath the window. Inside, cushioned by layers of old scarves, lay a slim external drive and a crumpled envelope. She placed the envelope in his hands. It was addressed not to her, but to the one who knows the 18. Ethan froze. Only he had ever described the Solace collection that way. In a private message to an anonymous seller years ago, Lena had seen it. She'd known. The air in the room shifted, as if they had just crossed a threshold neither could step back from. Maya's voice was steady, but it carried a weight that pressed into him. "My mom said if I ever gave this to you, I had to make sure you were ready for what comes next. Because once you see it, you can't walk away." He met her eyes and understood the things at once. The missing piece was here, and whatever lay inside it was more than art. It was a message meant for him, buried deep, waiting years to be found. "Do you want me to take this straight into part 4? Where Ethan finally unlocks the full piece on the giant 8K screen and the hidden signature. As secret within, tears open the truth he's been chasing. That's where the suspense will peak and the emotional punch will hit hardest. The elevator doors in Carrington Tower whispered shut behind them, sealing Maya and Liam inside the private lift with Ethan. Neither sibling spoke during the ride to the top floor. Maya stared at the mirrored wall, her reflection calm, almost unreadable. Liam clutched his backpack tightly, the corner of a crumpled sketch poking out of the zipper. Ethan keyed in a code only he knew, the kind that bypassed normal floor access. When the doors opened, they stepped into his private gallery office, a space most of his employees didn't even know existed. The air here was cooler, drier, preserved for art. Floor-to-ceiling windows bled in the fading light of the city. But the real focus was the massive 8K display dominating one wall. It wasn't a TV, it was a portal, his digital vault's main interface. He gestured to the center console. "We'll see it here." Maya handed him the slim external drive. Her hands didn't shake, but her eyes followed every movement he made as if she were memorizing his process. He slotted the drive into the console, and the screen awoke with a low hum. Data streamed in coded lines before morphing into the encrypted splash screen of the keeper. Ethan entered a string of commands. The encryption resisted at first, as if testing his resolve, then yielded. The screen dissolved into motion. It began with darkness, not flat black, but a layered void, textured like velvet and shadow. Then light bled in from the edges, not sudden, but growing in slow, deliberate pulses, each one revealing fragments, a sweep of gold dust, the arc of a wing, the ghost of a figure watching from above. The shapes moved with liquid precision, never repeating exactly the same way twice. Ethan felt his pulse quicken. The style was unmistakable. The layering of movement, the delicate interplay between light and negative space. It was Lena Reed's hand, refined to its final, most intricate form, and then he saw it. The signature appeared not in the corner, but in the shifting folds of the image itself, visible only for a breath before it vanished again. A.L. Not Lena's initials, but the private alias they had shared by accident 20 years ago, after the crash. A name no one else could possibly know. Ethan's throat tightened. He stepped closer, his fingertips brushing the glass, though he knew he couldn't touch the pixels. Memories hit with disorienting force. The night of the rain-slick road, the smell of burning metal, the blur of a young woman's face bending over him as she dragged him free. He wasn't alone in seeing it. "You recognize it," Maya said, quietly, not as a question. Before he could answer, the piece shifted again, revealing something hidden beneath the surface animation, a pattern of flickering symbols, arranged in clusters. To anyone else, they might have seemed like random digital noise, but Ethan saw the structure. It was code, He input a quick command to isolate the pattern. The screen responded instantly, peeling back the outer image to reveal a secondary sequence. A map, coordinates, and a locked folder tagged with a single word, Vault. "What is that?" Liam asked, eyes wide. Ethan didn't answer right away. He was already scanning the metadata. The coordinates pointed to a location upstate, and the folder's encryption was set in a style he recognized from Lena's earliest work. But what froze him wasn't the location, it was the date attached. 6 months before her death. Maya stepped closer, her voice low. She said it wasn't just a painting. She said it was a way to finish something she started, and that you'd know when you were ready. The city's glow reflected faintly on the glass, but Ethan's attention was locked on the hidden folder pulsing in the corner of the display. Whatever Lena had buried inside this artwork, she had meant for him to find it. But why now? And why leave the key with a 13-year-old who looked him dead in the eye, as if daring him to open it? He realized with an almost physical jolt that unlocking it might not just change his life. It could blow open a secret Lena had guarded for decades, and somewhere in the back of his mind, an uninvited thought whispered, what if someone else is looking for it too? If you want, I can take this straight into part 5, where Ethan begins decoding Lena's hidden message and discovers that the rival collector isn't just aware of the keeper, he's already moving to take it from them, by force. That's where the suspense will snap into high stakes and real danger. Rain lashed against the glass walls of Ethan's office as he stood before the massive display, the pulsing folder labeled Vault burning in the corner of the screen like a silent bear. Maya and Liam sat side by side on the leather couch, there, eyes shifting between him and the swirling code. Neither of them spoke, but Ethan could feel their unspoken question. What now? He keyed in a sequence meant to crack the encryption slowly, methodically, the safest way to avoid corrupting the file. But halfway through, the console beeped sharply. An alert flashed. Unauthorized access detected, mirror attempt in progress. Ethan's jaw tightened. Somewhere, someone else was trying to open the same file at the same time. And given Lena's encryption signature, that meant they weren't just a casual hacker. They knew exactly what they were looking for. He switched to a defensive protocol. Tracing the intrusion, a red thread of code slithered across the interface, bouncing between proxy servers, shifting IPs like a snake shedding skins. But one location flickered for just a heartbeat, a private auction house in Zurich. Ethan didn't need to guess who was behind it. Damien Harlow, the rival collector he'd beaten to 17 pieces of the Solace collection, a man whose fortune was built on taking what others couldn't protect. Maya's voice cut through the tension. You know who it is, don't you? Yes, Ethan said, eyes still on the screen. And he's not the type to back down. As if on cue, his secure line buzzed. No number, no caller ID. Ethan answered anyway. Damien's voice slid through the speaker, smooth and cold. Carrington, I hear you found something very dear to both of us. Why don't we skip the games and make this simple? Name your price. It's not for sale, Ethan said, flatly. That's unfortunate, Damien replied, because I always get what I want. One way or another. The line went dead. Maya shifted uncomfortably. What does he mean by that? Ethan didn't answer immediately. He was already running a sweep of the building's security. A chill crawled up his spine when he saw it, a digital shadow at the edge of the system. Damien wasn't just trying to take the file. He was testing the building's perimeter controls. Maya, Liam, Ethan said sharply, you're not going home tonight. Her eyes narrowed. Why? Because if Damien can't steal the file, he'll try to take the people who have it. The room fell into a taut silence. Outside, the storm deepened, the city lights blurring through sheets of rain. Ethan closed the console and removed the drive, slipping it into a concealed safe embedded in the wall. From this moment, he said, his voice low and deliberate, we are playing a game your mother started, and the stakes just went from art to survival. Maya stared at him, her face pale, but unflinching. Then you better be ready to win. If you'd like, I can now push straight into part 6, where the guardianship fight collides with a dangerous real-world chase, and Ethan must choose between protecting the children and unlocking the truth hidden in the keeper. That's where the suspense can spike into high tension with emotional depth. The storm had eased to a steady drizzle by morning, but the tension inside Carrington Tower had only sharpened. Ethan hadn't left his private suite all night, keeping the drive in the concealed wall safe while his in-house security team locked down the building. Maya and Liam had been given the adjoining guest suite, stocked with food, clothes, and an unobstructed view of the skyline. But the children's restless movements told him neither had slept much. When Claire stepped into the room with her tablet tucked under her arm, Ethan knew it wasn't going to be a good update. "Two things," she said. "One, your guardianship application is moving, but slowly. There's already a formal inquiry from Child Protective Services. Damien Harlow's name is nowhere on it, but my contact swears it's his people stirring the pot. Do we have activity on your building service entrances?" Cameras picked up the vans circling the block 3 times since dawn. Maya, curled in the armchair with Liam's head on her lap, looked up sharply. "He's coming for us." Ethan met her gaze. "Yes, which means we can't just sit here." He led them into his secure operations room, a space even more protected than his vault. Banks of monitors lit the walls, some displaying live city feeds, others running streams of code tracing network pings around the globe. He pulled up the encrypted file again, its pulsing icon a constant reminder of the risk they carried. "I've cracked part of it," he told her. "The map coordinates are real. There's a vault upstate, not a metaphorical one, an actual, physical vault. The field's metadata says your mother placed something there 6 months ago. But the encryption key to open it physically is inside this digital artwork, and Damien knows it." Maya's fingers curled around Liam's shoulder. "So what's in the vault?" Ethan hesitated. If Lena went to this much trouble to hide, it's more than art. It could be the original source code for the Solace collection. That would make the entire series traceable, authenticate every piece ever made. Whoever holds that can prove ownership beyond dispute, or rewrite the record entirely. The implication landed between them like a weight. If Damien got it first, not only would Ethan lose the final piece, but Lena's entire legacy could be rewritten, her authorship erased. Suddenly, one of the monitors flashed red. Perimeter breach. An elevator camera feed filled the screen. 2 men in dark coats, faces obscured, moving with the kind of efficiency that screamed professional extraction team. Ethan's voice hardened. "Claire, reroute the elevators. Lock every floor except ours." Maya was on her feet. "You said we can't sit here, so what's the plan?" He grabbed the drive from the safe, tucking it into a slim, waterproof case. "We're leaving. If Damien wants it, he'll have to follow us, but we're going to get to that vault before he does." The plan wasn't safe. It wasn't even rational. But as they slipped into the service corridor behind a coated steel door, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years, the raw pulse of purpose. He wasn't just protecting a collection anymore. He was protecting the only living pieces of Lena Reed's legacy, and he wasn't about to lose them. The road to the vault cut through the kind of upstate silence that made every sound feel magnified. The hum of Ethan's SUV, the low hiss of tires over wet asphalt, even the small click of Maya's thumb tapping nervously against the waterproof drive case in her lap. Liam sat in the back, eyes fixed on the passing blur of pines and skeletal winter trees, his hands still wrapped around the sketch he refused to let go of. They left Manhattan under cover of pre-dawn fog, taking back streets and switching vehicles, twice to avoid digital tracking. But Ethan knew Damien Harlow would be moving just as fast, with far fewer scruples and a dangerous ability to cut corners. When the GPS pinged their arrival, it was to a crumbling industrial building set back from the road. The paint had long since peeled from the walls, the windows barred. It looked abandoned, the kind of place you drive past without a second glance. But Lena Reed's coordinates didn't lie inside. The air smelled of dust and machine oil. A single metal door sat at the far end of the main hall, secured by a biometric lock and a mechanical deadbolt. Ethan crouched, entered the secondary code hidden in the keeper's animation, and felt the bolt release with a heavy thunk. Beyond the door was a climate-controlled chamber lined with shelves of sealed cases, each tagged with an alphanumeric code. But there, in the center, sat a single steel pedestal with a glass vault on top, and inside it, a slim black portfolio case marked only with the symbol Ethan had seen buried in Lena's earlier works, an unbroken circle with a line cutting. Through its center, Maya stepped forward, her breath fogging the glass. "That's hers." Ethan keyed in the final sequence, his pulse spiking as the glass retracted. He lifted the case and unlatched it. Inside were the items, an original hard drive, labeled in Lena's handwriting, and a sealed envelope. The handwriting on the envelope was precise, deliberate, and addressed to Ethan Carrington. He opened it slowly. The letter inside was short. "If you are reading this, you found them before he did." This drive is the complete Solace collection, every file, every proof, every draft. It's my life's work, but it's more than that. You know why. Take care of my children the way I once took care of you. And Ethan, don't just guard the art, guard the truth. The why in her note clicked into place when he plugged the drive into a portable reader. Beyond the artwork files was a hidden archive, photographs, dated correspondence, and documentation proving that Damien had been systematically erasing artists' credits, reselling their work as his own acquisitions through shadow firms. Lena hadn't just created the Solace collection, she'd embedded the evidence of his crimes inside it, waiting for the right person to unlock it. The heavy crunch of tires outside shattered the moment. Headlights cut through the slats of boarded windows. Ethan's security feed showed Damien's men spilling out into black SUVs, weapons visible beneath their coats. Maya, Liam, behind me now. They didn't hesitate. The glass vault door sealed again with a hiss as Ethan locked the portfolio back into the pedestal. The chamber's emergency failsafe kicked in, a steel blast door lowering over the entrance, just as the first impact of a battering ram hit from the other side. As they retreated toward the building's concealed rear exit, Ethan understood. Lena's final request wasn't just poetic sentiment. It was an order. She trusted him with more than her legacy. She trusted him with her children, her truth, and the power to end the man who had hunted her work into the shadows. Outside, the rain had started again, soft at first, then harder. As they ran toward the car waiting with engine running, over the pounding in his chest, Ethan made a silent vow. Damien wouldn't get the collection, the evidence, or the children. Not now, not ever. And as they sped away, Maya sat beside him, clutching the drive and whispering under her breath, almost to herself, I knew you'd come for it, and for us.